Each week as I prepare for this show, I have the pleasure of learning something new about the Civil War era, but usually it's a new angle on a story that we already know something about, like a fresh interpretation of a familiar military campaign. The thrill of discovering something completely new doesn't come along too often, but it did this week as I was introduced to a historical actor I'd never heard of, but now I'm unlikely to forget. You'll meet him too when we talk with Joe Goodbody, author of Kentucky Barracuda, Parker H. French, the notorious scoundrel and delightful rogue of antebellum and Civil War America. That's tonight on Civil War Talk Radio.
You are listening to Civil War Talk Radio. If you have a question or comment about our program, please send an email to prokopowicz@ecu.edu. That's PROKOPOWICZ@ecu.edu. Now, back to Civil War Talk Radio.
And welcome to Civil War Talk Radio, a character with whom I was not familiar until I read this week's book. The character's name is Parker Hardin French, 1826 through 1878. And the reason I know about him, and you will shortly, is through the efforts of Joe Goodbody, author of a book called Kentucky Barracuda. We'll find out. Mr. Goodbody, welcome to Civil War Talk Radio.
Well, thank you. We really appreciate it.
So I'm trying to remember how this came across my desk. If you contacted me or a publisher, or it doesn't really matter. What is interesting is Civil War Talk Radio does get books sent in from publishers of all sizes, from independent authors and or listeners who have suggestions about books, and most of them are quite good, and often they turn into episodes. And occasionally, if somebody is self-publishing a historical fiction novel, they don't have any particular background in the Civil War. They've just read a lot of books, and now they're going to write their own book, but it's fiction. We're not going to talk about that here. We don't have time. Too many interesting real-life stories going on. So not every book that crosses the doorway makes it in. And this one, at first, I thought, oh, here's an obscure guy I've never heard of. He's related to the author, so maybe it's just going to be genealogy in disguise. Not the case at all. But you are related, not directly to the character in the book, but you have ancestors who are connected with this character. I guess the easiest question to ask is, how did you learn about French? What brought you into the orbit of the French story?
Right. Well, I was doing family genealogy and trying to sort out what my great-grandfather had done in the mid-19th century. And he was a member of Parker French's expedition to the gold rush. And basically he was swindled by Parker French amongst about 250 other guys. So it intrigued me. I linked up on Wikipedia to see what else this guy had done, because family lore, my great-grandfather was an ornery and not a naive guy, and how would he get swindled by some character that I'd never heard of before? So when I started checking him out, he had an interesting story, and I got intrigued, and I started pulling all of the historical threads and found out he had done much more than I'd ever known about. I sort of fashioned myself sort of a history buff, and now I'm not too sure anymore that I found out all this about him. What else have I missed in studies and individual looks into the antebellum and Civil War period? So it was quite revealing to me, as well as a lot of my readers, and obviously you know.
So you're what do you do when not writing about Parker French? You're not a professional historian. What do you do?
Well, I'm retired. I was in the military of the Army for 28 years, and then in corporate life for another 12 or so, and retired fully in 2011, so I had plenty of time on my hands and started doing a lot of genealogy, and then ran into this character, and then it took me 5 or 6 years of research and writing to bring it to fruition. So,
well, one of the things that struck me about this, about Parker French, is in the first chapter you describe his background, his connection. He grows up in Kentucky, and as I'm reading your book, I'm thinking, oh, I know that guy. All these people you mentioned, all these last names of Hardin and Edwards, they're all in the orbit of Abraham Lincoln, who I spent a lot of time reading about. Lincoln, of course, is from Kentucky, but then some of these people migrate to Illinois, Indiana, but they're still in the Parker French orbit. So it's a small world. It's 1/10 the size of today's population, and a lot of people know each other. So talk a little bit about his background, who he's related to.
Okay, his father's family was a French. Obviously the last name of French. They were a farming family originally in Virginia, and then went to Kentucky in the late 1880s or 1780s, 1790s, and then his mother was the sort of the progeny of a really important political and business and statesman type family, lawyers, judges, that type of family, the Hardins. So she was with that background, and then when she died when Parker French was only around 6 or 7, he went to live with his maternal uncle, Parker Calhoun Hardin, who was his namesake, and then so grew up in Columbia area, Adair County in southern Kentucky, and then went from there. He had all the benefits of that kind of life and good education, and could have been a very credible and good guy, but turned the wrong way.
Well, he did. He had all these connections through marriage. You keep again reading, see these names. Oh, here's somebody named McGoffin. Where have I heard that? Oh, yeah, he's the governor of Kentucky. At the time of the Civil War. Who's this guy, Edwards? That's governor of Illinois, and related to Lincoln's through marriage and so on. So he seems to know everybody, and he seems to be related to everybody and to know everybody. And he goes off to St. Louis, which is a big river town, likely to become the next New York City. And as you say, he seems to have everything in his favor. Everything is set for him to be successful. He starts building an ocean-going sailing ship, which nobody has done in St. Louis. It all looks good. At this point, the listeners, if you're the least bit interested in this story, and you should be, I recommend that you hit pause on the podcast and go and get a copy of this book and read it, because there's going to be a lot of spoilers from here on in. We're going to talk about what this guy did and who he became. So if you want to have the experience I did of just turning every page and going, no, you're kidding, really, he did that, next, then now is the time to go ahead and read it and come back and listen to us later. So he's in St. Louis. Joey's doing well, or seems to be, but all of a sudden, the ship thing doesn't work out, does it?
No, and I had a hard time figuring out whether it was just a business enterprise that went terribly wrong, and possibly he was losing money on it, or something else occurred, and then he abandoned the project and left debtors and partners and everybody else in debt with $90,000 in liabilities. And at the time, that's about $2.7 million today. So But I could not establish whether he initially thought he could scam a bunch of people, or it was just a business enterprise gone wrong, and then he absconded.
So he goes off to New York, as you say, leaving investors in the lurch. His next enterprise does not leave us in any doubt as to whether this is just a little accident, the business misfortune, or a very large-scale criminal undertaking. We're going to take a short break and come back and talk about the first wrong turn, or the first serious wrong turn of the Kentucky Barracuda. That's the name of the book we're discussing tonight, Kentucky Barracuda, Parker Hardin French. The author, our guest, is Joe Goodbody. I'm Jerry Prokopowicz, and this is Civil War Talk Radio.
Stimulating.
You are listening to Civil War Talk Radio. If you have a question or comment about our program, please send an email to prokopowiczg@ecu.edu. That's PROKOPOWICZG@ecu.edu. Now, back to Civil War Talk Radio.
And welcome back to Civil War Talk Radio. I'm talking today with Joe Goodbody, author of Kentucky Barracuda, Parker Hardin French. The subtitle calls him the notorious scoundrel and delightful rogue of antebellum and Civil War America. In the first segment, we learned about the excellent upbringing and many connections by family to important people in Kentucky and elsewhere in the Midwest that Parker French enjoyed. His first business scheme in St. Louis goes wrong. A lot of people lose money, but he moves off to New York. The next scheme, the one that your ancestors were victims of, Joe, is the what's the formal name of it here? Parker French's express passenger train.
Right.
This is a wagon train. Let me entice our listeners. We will travel by comfortable and easy wagon coaches along the line of our military posts, ascending gradually over the gently swelling uplands of western Texas, through the delightful and cultivated country around El Paso, where U.S. troops are now stationed, down the banks of the Gila amid the ancient Aztec ruins and hieroglyphic evidence of a civilization that has long since passed away, thence over the magnificent plains of California to San Francisco. So at this point, I'm ready to sign up. I mean, this sounds like a National Geographic tour. We're going to have nice food, nice hotels, comfortable coaches, beautiful scenery. Who would not want to go? And when you end up, you get to the California gold fields where there are bushels of gold lying on the ground to just pick up. I can see why your ancestors signed up for this.
Absolutely. Well, when my great-grandfather got to New York at that time, he had planned to get there, and along with a bunch of other guys from Lake County, Illinois, and to sign up and buy some tickets on this normal steamship route that went down to Panama and across the Isthmus and up to California. But the steamship tickets were completely sold out, so they were desperate and ready to go, with somebody. So it fit right in.
So they see this advertising and they sign up. And now they actually have to go by steamship first as well. They go down to Cuba, and they're going to go through into the Gulf of Mexico. But they run into some trouble in Cuba. And not for the last time in the book do we come across filibusters, Americans who are headed into the Caribbean for political purposes, to try to take over local governments. Was this actually a disguised filibuster attempt? Was French really trying to get these people to go down to Cuba and take over the island?
That was some of the discussions at the time. There were some newspaper reports that his real intent was to be part of a force that was going into. Can you hear me?
Yep, still good.
I'm sorry. He was suspected of being part of the force that was going into Cuba about the same time as the Lopez expedition, who was trying to wrest Cuba from Spain, along with a lot of American support from both the South and Northern industrialists.
So
there was never any real proof of it, but there was a lot of speculation.
So eventually they're allowed to leave Cuba. The ship ends up in Texas, and now they have to go. I guess they're crossing Texas. My knowledge of Texas geography is not particularly strong, but you helpfully point out they are about to make a trip that will take a couple hours on a modern interstate. Crossing the state, but it's going to take them days, weeks to do this. So how does that trip go?
Well, they start off in Lavaca, Texas, and at the time, the road up to San Antonio was basically a trail over some tough country. And at the time, they had one of the historic rainfalls in the area. Hello?
Oh, still here.
Okay, sorry. So it was a tough route up to San Antonio, and now from Lavaca, Texas to San Antonio, you can easily do it in half a day. At that time, it took them days and days and days, and so it was a tough trip right from the get-go. And then when they left San Antonio on the way to El Paso. It took them 60 days from San Antonio to El Paso. Let me go back a step. He had promised,
sure.
Along with all the other, great scenery and everything, he had originally promised to get everybody to California within 60 days along this route. Well, it took him 60 days just to get from San Antonio to El Paso, which that was the normal time at the period in that period. Of basically 10 miles a day on average.
So they're moving slowly.
Right.
Their morale has been kept reasonably high to this point because French treats them well. He's able to afford this because he's got a letter of credit from the merchants Howland and Aspinwall, and everywhere they go, when they stop in New Orleans, when they land in Texas, they get to San Antonio, everywhere they go, all he has to do is say, put it on the bill of Howland and Aspinwall. They've authorized me to spend whatever, and they'll take care of the bills. So they're living all right. Yeah,
correct. And not only was the general comforts, good, but he was a very charismatic and charming and great to gab, and so he could convince almost anybody that he was doing what was in their best interest. And that was part of his theme. He could convince the most skeptical that he was doing the right thing for them.
Well, and that's where one of the questions I have throughout this book is, why has a screenplay not yet been made of this? I'm picturing these guys in this wagon train, and they're making their way down this trail. And meanwhile, behind them, word has gotten back. The first merchants back in New Orleans who tried to cash those checks, those drafts on Howland and Aspinwall, are finding out there's no letter of credit. This is a forgery. So they're galloping after. They're crossing Texas, trying to catch up with him, and they catch him in the middle of nowhere and say, "You're busted." A lesser man would have said, "You're right," but he works his way out of it. How does he do that?
He's just I think. Well, first of all, I think he was a brilliant guy with probably a combination psychopathic and megalomania, type guy who had no empathy for anybody. So he was able to present himself with his smarts and with his gift of gab and basic charisma and other basic really good leadership qualities, that he was going to give them what they want. But it built on the thinking of that whole crew over time, that they finally just finally lost any confidence in the guy, and that's when the expedition broke up at basically what was the end of the empire at the time in El Paso.
So he ends up fleeing to Mexico. If we told every story in the book, we'd be here for 6, 8, 10 hours. He ends up in Mexico. He ends up in a gunfight. He gets shot. His arm is amputated. He's not quite one step of the law because he ends up in jail, but he talks his way out of that. He's back back doing things somehow. You describe at one point somehow he gets involved with mobilizing Indians or mercenaries to fight against other Indians on behalf of the Mexican government. And newspapers back in the United States are reporting he's dead repeatedly. How did you figure out, from all the conflicting sources that you cite, you point out there are multiple stories of what happened in Mexico. How do you resolve that when you're reading these things that give such very different accounts of what happened to him?
Well, I tried to present every story that I found and tried to give the differing accounts, because there was no way to establish what the ground truth was at the time. So you had him, being either a criminal or a paramilitary hero, right? Of the Durango, the governor of Durango. You either had him assaulting the travelers on the Silver Road between Durango and Mazatlan, or he was a guy that was just trying to travel himself. So there were all kinds of different views of the character, and there was no way to establish what the truth was. So I tried to present it and do the compare and contrast of each truth. So
they're all good. I mean, they're all interesting. He ends up, so he leaves Mexico. He does get out of jail one way or another, goes off to California, and here you never know who California will elect, but the next thing you know, he's a district attorney and a state legislator. His wife sues for divorce. He goes back to New York and brings her out, and they're back together. Nothing sticks to this guy.
No. Well, not only was he elected to the legislature from the San Luis Obispo area, he was elected almost unanimously, if the story is correct. And he ends up in the legislature and becomes a member of the Ways and Means Committee. So he's right in the middle of establishing a future for himself, through a little bit of graft and corruption. So he fits in wherever he can in trying to make his way.
Now, many listeners will be familiar in an outline way with William Walker, the filibuster who goes to Nicaragua. They made a movie about him a couple of decades ago. And in some books, French shows up as a minor character in this adventure. You argue that he's actually he's a big part of Walker's expedition, and he plays a significant role. What does he do in Nicaragua?
Well, first of all, when he presents later in some anonymous articles he wrote for some newspapers in Washington, D.C., that he was a central character in the original plans, the original funding of the enterprise, the recruitment of men, the gathering of material. And there's some second and third hand indicators that was, absolutely true, that he was a key member of that cabal that went from California and down and, basically formed a military dictatorship of Nicaragua for, about 18 months. After he gets to Nicaragua, he's a key figure in a court-martial of one of the Nicaraguans there that ends up in the general being executed. He becomes basically the Secretary of Finance for the government, and then it becomes very influential and established by the actual newspaper articles that are really talking him up as a key member of the government at the time. And then, of course, he leaves there and gets appointed as the ambassador to Washington, D.C., and ultimately there is rejected by the Pierce administration for all his past nefarious deeds, and is used as a reason for the Pierce administration not to recognize the Walker regime down in Nicaragua.
So he's right in the heart of it. Now he's back in Washington. He's an ambassador, gets rejected, skips out, goes back to Nicaragua. They don't want him either. He's fired there. Yet he's going to land on his feet again. We're going to take another short break, come back and find out what happens during the Civil War with this character. We're talking tonight with Joe Goodbody, author of Kentucky Barracuda.
Crimes Against Humanity. Host Opal Singer.
You are listening to Civil War Talk Radio. If you have a question or comment about our program, please send an email to Prokopowicz @ecu.edu. That's PROKOPOWICZ@ecu.edu. Now, back to Civil War Talk Radio.
And welcome back to Civil War Talk Radio. I'm Jerry Prokopowicz, talking with Joe Goodbody, author of Kentucky Barracuda, Parker Hardin French. We follow the adventures of Mr. French as he leads prospectors astray, trying to get to California. He swindles firms back east out of their money. And in the process, he goes to California himself, becomes politically connected there, participates in William Walker's Nicaragua filibuster in 1855-56. Eventually, he ends up back in the United States. We see him at the Democratic Convention in 1856. He's in Minnesota at one point. He's back in California. Then comes the war. And I guess the first question to ask is, which side is he on?
Well, I think he's pretty much. I'm convinced that he was a ideological chameleon that didn't care which side he was on, as long as he thought it was going to win and it was going to make money for him, and he was going to get some kind of power and influence and a future with whatever was going on. He initially sided with the Confederacy and then fashioned a grand conspiracy to go into the North and try to influence the abolitionists and the pro-union forces that were trying to help some of the border states stay in the Union. So he conned them and gathered money from them that he was supposed to send south to, primarily eastern Tennessee. And so he schemed against major industrialists up in Boston. But at the same time, he had another alter ego that was, from all reports that were in the newspapers at the time, was a Confederate agent and a agent of the Knights of the Golden Circle at the time.
So who are the Knights of the Golden Circle? Let me ask you, who are the Knights of the Golden Circle? Tell us about that.
Well, it was a group that had an aspirational theme that the Golden Circle was going to be basically a slave empire that centered on Havana and took in all of the southern states, eastern Mexico, a large part of Central America, and that Golden Circle was, like I said, an aspirational empire that was seen by the founders of this organization as either a part of the United States co-equal with the North, with primarily senatorial balance in view, or it would be a separate nation. There's still a lot of historical argument amongst historians on whether it was a true, powerful organization or just a pure aspirational thing. But at the time, the northern newspapers and the northern government certainly saw them as a threat. Eventually, he was arrested up in Brantford, Connecticut as a spy and as an agent of the Knights of the Golden Circle, and jailed in Fort Warren along with all the other political prisoners that were in residence in Fort Warren, Boston Harbor. So that's the short version of it.
So he's in the North. He's got these multiple identities. He's Carlyle Murray to some people. He's Charles Maxey to other people. One thing that struck me is while he's playing these multiple games, under one identity he's bilking abolitionists out of money that he claimed he's going to use for the Southern Unionists. And with the other identity, he's recruiting members to the Knights of the Golden Circle. But he's kind of a famous guy, and he's only got one arm after the Mexico gunfight where he had an arm amputated. It's not like he's an inconspicuous person. How does he not just get caught walking down the street in Boston?
Well, I think he finally did. There were plenty of there was plenty of information flying around, but that was basically 10 years earlier. So I think he disappeared from the public consciousness from the time in California or on the expedition to California, and then the Nicaraguan events, and he actually did get caught up in Boston because somebody recognized him. Caleb Cushing, who was the former Attorney General while he was the proposed ambassador to Washington, D.C. So Caleb Cushing finally recognized him. And it wasn't, and finally meant it was after, half a year of these events up in Boston. So it kind of surprised me that he was able to go from point A to point B. The other thing I realized also that there were a lot of men going around with injuries from the Mexican-American War. Mm-hmm. And he as Carlyle Murray, he presented himself as a veteran of the Mexican-American War, and that he had been injured at Battle of Buena Vista. So I think that's how he got over it. But he was nevertheless finally caught. So
I was fascinated by the attempt to swindle Amos Lawrence, for whom Lawrence, Kansas is named, one of the Secret Six that support John Brown. That somebody else was actually trying to swindle Lawrence with some forged letters from Andrew Johnson, the senator from Tennessee. So that gets exposed, and Lawrence is appalled. Oh, someone's trying to swindle me. And then French goes and actually writes to the real Johnson, gets a real letter of introduction from Johnson, and presents that to Lawrence. This guy just has no limit on his nerve, his ability to fool people.
Yeah, what's interesting at the time, the letters from Andrew Johnson. He had a letter from Brownlow from Tennessee, Parson Brownlow,
right,
and a couple of other letters from key figures in the union and unionists from both Tennessee and the federal government. But at the time, newspapers were saying those were forgeries when he got arrested. And I found the documents actually in the Library of Congress and National Archives, and no, they were correct. They were true letters from Andrew Johnson and the other ones. So it was another one of these things where people thought he was a forger and being a con man. Mm-hmm. After I found out that they were actually good letters or real letters, I realized then that he was doggone too smart to get caught in any kind of that kind of forgery, which would have been easily found.
Right. So he does end up in prison in Boston Harbor from November of 1861 to March of 1862. How does he get out?
Along with that was right in the middle of all of the habeas corpus controversy. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the political prisoners in Fort Warren were there with no charges and jailed and continued to be imprisoned with under all the pressure of the habeas corpus controversies. Then there was an investigation of each one of them, whether they were to remain in jail or released upon some kind of loyalty oath or promise not to act against the Union. And basically, he was amongst that crew. He was one of the last ones that was released from Fort Warren in late February of 1862.
So at this point, surely the North has had enough of him. We've seen the last of him. He can't possibly get involved with the Union Army at this point, or can he?
Or you'd think that would be the case. So he goes into Washington, D.C., and lives openly in Washington, D.C. as Parker French, and then becomes engaged with the Army of the Potomac in being a lawyer for some court-martial cases, and he becomes a purveyor of supply, a higher-level sutler, supporting brigade and division and corps-level units. And so you would think that somebody would wonder what he was going on. And so I couldn't figure out whether people just didn't care or were keeping him under view or he was a double agent or, who knows what he was doing. All that came to fruition, though, he made a lot of money as a purveyor and a chief of his partners.
Well, yeah, exactly. The sutlers, we've all heard of them. In 1863, Meade, Army of the Potomac commander, says only one sutler per regiment, only one purveyor per division or corps headquarters. But there he is in Geary's headquarters, 2nd Division, 12th Corps. And as you say, he cheats his partner, making more money. But he doesn't get caught because fortuitously 12th Corps gets sent west after Chickamauga. So he's out there. He's living a charmed life. He gets away again, or at least it looks that way at that point. The spoiler alert again, listeners. If you're going to read the book and find out the ending, justice is not served. He just sort of lives out a quiet life after the war, doesn't he?
He does. He gets caught up in a lot of court cases and does not do well in a lot of the court cases, and eventually goes into bankruptcy and loses his shirt. But eventually, marries a credible young woman from Vermont and then or New Hampshire, and ends his life in obscurity and finally dies of probably complications from rheumatism and malaria and, probable alcoholism.
Well, as you point out in one of the last chapters called Small-Time Scams, Bite-Sized Chunks, so he's done with the giant scams, trying to make the huge killing, But he can't get over the habit of serial dishonesty, and he's still making money the small way. We're almost at the end of our time. I don't want to leave listeners hanging. What happened to your ancestors who were on that express train?
When the expedition broke up in El Paso, the group of 16, 17 odd Lake County, Illinois guys kept on going as a group. They worked their way down through Central America, Mexico, through Durango, and on to Mazatlan. Caught a ship at Mazatlan and ended up in San Francisco in December time frame of 1850. Interestingly enough, my great uncle or great uncle had died of some kind of fever, and my great grandfather was actually as sick as he was, and somehow survived to get up into the gold fields, make a little bit of money, and was able to go back to Illinois and start his life, get married, and buy some farmland in Lake County, Illinois.
So happy ending there,
happy
at least. But for French, as you point at the very end, his funeral is a very respectable one. All the most important people in town are there, and it's as if he had never done anything wrong. But your characterization, here's somebody who is an incredibly persuasive talker, as you suggest, sociopathic, no empathy for his victims, promises people what they want to hear. They're happy to believe him. He takes advantage of them. When he gets caught and exposed, he just walks away and then does it again. It's a remarkable story. But one that is worth reading. It's an entertaining book, certainly. So listeners, if you want to learn more about the Kentucky Barracuda, Parker Hardin French, the notorious scoundrel and delightful rogue of antebellum and Civil War America, you'll want to get the book by our guest tonight, Joe Goodbody. Joe, thanks so much for being on Civil War Talk Radio.
Thank you very much. It was an honor. Really appreciate it.
And listeners, as always, thank you for listening to Civil War Talk Radio.